Hey guys! Tonight we slip barefoot into the velvet dusk of forgotten kingdoms, where the moon hangs low like a heavy lid over the secrets of 1,000 nights. Your eyes are still adjusting to the dark, but your nose catches it first. Smoke, spices, something bitter, something floral, something almost human. You follow it instinctively, like prey drawn to a predator that smells like comfort. You duck under a reed curtain and find yourself in a Nubian queen's chamber. Silks strung from ceiling to floor, oil lamps flickering against sandstone walls etched with lions and lovers. Her eyes catch yours, and in her hand, a steaming clay cup. She offers it with a smile that has toppled thrones. You drink. You're not entirely sure what's in it. Hints of ginger, crushed beetle shell, maybe goat bile. But suddenly your skin hums like you've been kissed by lightning. This is where tonight begins. You've heard of Spanish fly, maybe ginseng, maybe oysters if you're from a beach town that lies to tourists. But tonight, we dive deeper, much deeper, into Africa's vault of erotic pharmacology, a place where desire was a weapon, a ritual, and sometimes a state secret. You'll meet queens who brewed seduction like warlords mix gunpowder, healers who sold potions to merchants that promised more than stamina. Some promised loyalty or madness. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. Drop your location and local time in the comments too. Let's see which side of midnight you're listening from. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You're now curled at the edge of Nubia, thousands of years ago. Picture this. The desert winds outside whisper like gossiping handmaidens, and inside the queen's perfumed chamber, the real drama unfolds. Her name is Amanirenas, and though she's better known for facing down Roman legions, you're more interested in what she used to do after war councils. Her royal brews were legendary, not just for taste, but for what they unlocked. Ground lion's mane, fermented date syrup, and the secret ingredient, boiled acacia pods, thought to sharpen wit and heighten sensitivity, everywhere. Whether it actually worked is still debated. Historians still argue whether these aphrodisiacs were purely symbolic or had legitimate physiological effects. But what's not in doubt is the intent. You drink it, you look at someone, and suddenly your heartbeat isn't the only thing rising. Now here's your first real sex story, and I'm warning you, don't sip anything while listening. According to one scroll found buried under a temple in Meroe, Amanirenas once seduced a defector Roman envoy. He came with the usual baggage, entitlement, coin, probably a few unsanitary opinions about barbarian women. But he didn't leave the same. She invited him to a feast, fed him seasoned roast duck soaked in her brew, danced once, and he stayed for 6 years. Gave up his Roman name, started wearing local silks, and according to one record, was last seen giggling barefoot in the palace gardens wearing nothing but gold chains and a wide grin. Diplomacy, it turns out, has many techniques. One of them is pharmacologically enhanced foreplay. And here's a fringe tidbit for you. Some Nubian temples had rooms dedicated to scent alone, literally rooms of smell. Clerics would burn bundles of resins and herbs believed to stimulate specific states, devotion, war readiness, or carnal yearning. One of these was called the Red Room, and no, not like that Netflix show. It was lined with cedar wood, soaked in crushed flowers, and dusted with powdered cinnamon bark. It's said young noblewomen were taken there before their weddings to prepare the spirit. You wonder how long they actually stayed. One record says 3 days, another says a week. One scribe, suspiciously vague, just wrote, "She came back, changed." Here's the thing about African kingdoms and sex. Unlike the prudish scripts written centuries later by colonizers, these civilizations often embraced sensuality as power. Desire wasn't hidden, it was harnessed. It was carved into palace walls, sung in victory songs, and sometimes gifted in small, dangerous bottles. You weren't supposed to fear it. You were supposed to understand it, direct it, ride it like a lion into whatever conquest you were chasing. Take a moment now. Feel the floor under your feet, the ghost heat of that Nubian brew humming in your veins. You're not just listening. You're time-traveling with your whole nervous system. Each night of this journey, you'll follow a scent trail of lost ingredients, whispered spells, and pillow-side politics. And each time you'll ask, was this desire, or was it design? But keep your guard up. Not all love potions were meant to make you fall in love. Some were made to make you forget. Others to make you stay. Forever. You're still warm from the Nubian brew when the scent shifts. Earthier now, with something animal in it, almost unsettling. You follow it through the reeds until your sandals sink into damp, muddy banks along the Nile. This is ancient Egypt, but not the glamorized version with Cleopatra and golden eyeliner memes. No, you're crouched beside a hut where a healer is mixing something thick and brown into a paste. And it smells dangerous. She dips her fingers in, and you swear it sizzles in the air like wet thunder. This, she tells you, was one of the oldest recorded aphrodisiacs in history. A contraceptive mix of fermented acacia, natron, and yes, crocodile dung. You blink. She nods. Ancient Egyptian women would insert this into themselves before sex, both as birth control and, some claimed, as a way to warm the womb. It was believed to trigger a heat, an inner flame that enhanced sensation, though no modern doctor would sign off on that. Still, historians still argue whether this blend was truly effective, or if it worked by scaring the sperm away with sheer intimidation. But don't let the dung distract you from the elegance. Egyptian sex magic was layered, ritual oils scented with myrrh and lotus, ceremonial beads worn on the thigh or hidden in the hair, all designed to seduce with subtlety. The real art wasn't just in touch, but anticipation. And few knew this better than Queen Hatshepsut's personal perfumer, whose journal survived under layers of soot in a collapsed storeroom. In it, he describes preparing a seduction oil using crushed date seeds, blue lotus, and something he only calls sun resin. Every time she met a rival king or emissary, she wore it behind her ears. Legend says one Babylonian prince actually hallucinated during their meeting and tried to marry her mid-negotiation. She declined, politely, diplomatically, while still smelling like the sunrise. Now, here's your sex story, and it comes with feathers. The scribe Anan, relatively minor in the grand scope of pharaohs but prolific in gossip, once wrote about a dancer named Sia who performed during the festival of Hathor. She had an act that involved pouring a warm, perfumed oil down her spine while balancing a ceramic jar on her head. Afterward, she was said to spend the night in a temple chamber with whoever the goddess chose. That year, the goddess apparently chose 5 men. Sia reportedly emerged the next morning smiling, barefoot, and with a new necklace made of gold scarabs. It's unclear whether she ever returned to common life or just became a walking legend, but the oil she used became known as Sia's Blessing, and copies of its recipe were carved onto ivory sticks and passed between royal harems like sacred secrets. But not all love in Egypt was golden. Here's your fringe tidbit. In some circles, women used scarab beetle powder mixed with red ochre as a lip stain that doubled as a potion trigger. When kissed, it allegedly activated a chemical reaction meant to cause deep infatuation. Whether it worked or just tasted horrific is unclear, but several lovers reportedly disappeared after a single evening wearing the stain. One was a military officer last seen muttering poetry to his sandals. Another was a foreign diplomat who renounced his trade agreements and tried to join a traveling theater troupe. Again, you decide what's true. But if someone kisses you wearing crimson powder that smells vaguely of beetles, maybe don't sign anything. And here's where it gets poetic. To the Egyptians, lust wasn't dirty. It was divine. They carved scenes of love-making into tombs, not to titillate, but to guide the spirit through the afterlife with warmth and familiarity. Sex was part of the soul's journey, not just the body's need. Even fertility rituals were less about procreation and more about continuity. The idea that passion itself was sacred energy, something to be stoked, tended, passed on. When they burned incense in temple ceremonies, it wasn't just for gods. It was also to invite memory, longing, the aching hum of the flesh. Now let me bring you back to that crocodile dung. Not because it's gross. Okay, it is a little. But because it says something real. These people were fearless about blending the spiritual and the sensual. If it smelled strong, burned a little, and came from a beast worshipped as a god, why wouldn't it be used in bed? You wonder what modern lovers would think if they had to light incense made of dried dung and whisper prayers before touching each other. Maybe things would be slower, maybe more intense, maybe less performative and more deliberate. You sit now by the riverbank, the healer still stirring, the wind carrying the sharp scent across the reeds. You don't know if you're aroused, confused, or just deeply curious. But that's the point of this journey. Not just to collect weird trivia, but to feel history's heat on your neck. To realize that every generation has reached for pleasure, for connection, for control. And sometimes they found it in places you'd least expect, like the warm belly of a crocodile or a feather dipped in sun oil. You don't notice the transition right away, just that the air thickens and tastes darker, like overripe berries and damp bark. The Nile has vanished behind you, and now you're in the heat-soaked highlands of Angola, where the trees lean in close like nosy elders eavesdropping on secrets. You're in the court of Queen Njinga, the infamous warrior, diplomat, and, depending on who you ask, master seductress. But let's get one thing straight. She didn't do candlelit roses and murmured pillow talk. Njinga seduced like she strategized, ruthlessly, brilliantly, and often with ingredients no man would dare question. Tonight, you're watching her swirl a gourd of wine in her palm, eyes half-lidded, voice like smoke as she chats with a visiting chief. The wine is laced, not with poison. Njinga needed allies, not corpses, but with bitter herbs, powdered roots from a tree whose bark was known to cause fevered dreams, and her own body oil collected after battle. She believed that mixing her essence with the drink would bind the chief to her not just politically, but spiritually. And judging by the way he's staring at her mouth like it's a holy scripture, it's working. Historians still argue whether these concoctions were truly magical or simply psychological warfare disguised as hospitality. But let's be honest, when a woman like Njinga offers you a drink, you're going to feel something. The ingredients she favored were no accident. There's a root known locally as mutuya, said to make the heart race and the skin more sensitive to touch. Another, kikoka, reportedly causes vivid dreams and mild euphoria when fermented in wine. Combined, they don't just inebriate, they create what her court called the trembling, a condition somewhere between arousal and spiritual possession. Her servants were trained to detect its onset: flushed cheeks, rapid blinking, involuntary humming. And once the chief started humming, Njinga would lean in and whisper terms of alliance so sweetly he'd sign away his strongest battalion without blinking. Here's your sex story. One chronicler, later exiled for excessive poetic license, described a night when Njinga hosted both a Portuguese general and a rival tribal leader at the same feast. She wore nothing but gold chains and palm oil, seated between them on a panther skin rug. As they ate roast antelope drenched in her signature sauce, she offered them wine from the same gourd, watching who would sip first. The Portuguese man, ever the opportunist, drank deeply. Within an hour he was giggling, declaring undying admiration, and asking if he could remain as her personal guard. The tribal leader, more cautious, only sipped. He lasted 2 hours before he too leaned into her shoulder, whispering battle plans like they were bedtime stories. Both men stayed the night. Neither spoke much the morning after. What happened in that candle-lit lodge is lost to history, but the next week, Njinga acquired 2 new fortresses without lifting a spear. Now for your fringe tidbit. In Njinga's court, there existed a secret ritual called Kulanda Moyo. To stir the soul, it involved a mixture of crushed fireflies, goat milk, and clay gathered during thunderstorms. This paste was smeared onto the temples and inner wrists before negotiation or seduction, said to awaken ancestral memory. Some believed it gave the user insight into the true desires of whoever they faced. Others said it just smelled awful but made you feel bold. One courtier claimed that after using it, he could hear people's lies echo like drum beats in his head. He also claimed the moon followed him home. Take from that what you will. But let's talk about the real question here. Was this all just theater? Is there any modern equivalent to slipping someone a potion brewed from your own battle sweat and tree bark? Not really. Maybe a playlist. Maybe that suspiciously intense cocktail someone orders on a second date. But the core idea is timeless. Control the moment. Flavor it with mystery. Add just enough risk to make the heart race. Njinga wasn't just a queen. She was a conductor of tension, mixing diplomacy with chemistry, warfare with whispers. Every gesture was loaded. Every scent was calculated. She knew that the strongest bonds aren't forged by force. They're fermented slowly, in wine and want and long, smoky stares. You sit now by the fire pit outside her court, the gourd still warm in your hand. You sniff it again, earthy, pungent, oddly floral. You wonder what dreams it might give you if you dared sip. You wonder what memories it might stir. Because that's the deeper truth, isn't it? Aphrodisiacs aren't always about arousal. Sometimes they're about remembrance, longing. The part of us that wants to believe something wild and ancient still lives in our blood, waiting for the right mix of root and fire to wake it up. You smell it before you see it. Salt, thick in the air, clinging to your skin like sweat after a dance you didn't expect to enjoy. The desert wind bites your lips, but there's sweetness on the breeze too, like melting sugar or distant perfume carried from a dream. You're standing at the edge of the Senegalese salt plains, staring into the pink shimmer of Lac Rose, a lake so saturated it glows like a giant tongue under the sun. Traders have gathered here for centuries, but tonight, the market is different. It's quieter, intimate. You walk past mounds of salt carved by hand and see women in indigo robes whispering into cupped palms, exchanging little sachets of crushed minerals and dried petals. These aren't for food preservation, they're for heart preservation. And loins. Because salt, in this part of the world, was never just salt. It was currency, spell, aphrodisiac, depending on who sold it to you and how much you were willing to believe. One sachet catches your eye. It's labeled with a single word, Mbegel. In Wolof, that means tenderness, but in market slang, it's code for something stronger. You open it, cautiously. Inside, there's a mix of finely ground pink salt, hibiscus dust, and tiny black seeds that smell faintly of citrus and cloves. A woman approaches you, her headscarf patterned like lightning bolts. She smiles without showing teeth and tells you to sprinkle a pinch of this under your tongue before you speak to someone you love or someone you want to love you. She leans in closer, eyes gleaming. "It doesn't make them fall," she whispers. "It makes you unforgettable." Historians still argue whether such practices were rooted in spiritual belief or merely clever commerce wrapped in romance. But if you're standing there with that sachet burning a hole in your pocket, it hardly matters. Here's your sex story. A tale still murmured in the alleys of St. Louis about a merchant named Samba who fell for a griot's daughter named Yassine. He tried everything, gifts, gold, poems, but she would only ever smile and thank him. One day, desperate, he went to the salt market and bought a vial of Ngalam Dek B, city longing. It was salt infused with sun-dried rose petals and a sliver of ambergris stolen from a dead whale. He wore it on his wrists and behind his ears for 7 days. On the 8th day, he passed Yasin in the alley and she stopped, sniffed the air and asked, "Why do I remember you from a dream I've never had?" That night, she sang for him by firelight. They never married. But every year, during the dry season, Yasin would return to that same spot and leave a handful of salt by the wall. Some say that's love. Others say the spell never wore off. And here's your fringe tidbit. There was once a belief among desert traders that certain salt crystals carried memory, meaning, if harvested during emotional moments, say a first kiss, a mourning ceremony, or the second you realize someone's never coming back, those crystals would preserve the feeling like an invisible echo. Some lovers exchanged them instead of letters. A handful of salt that tingled when you held it was said to contain desire. A warm one carried grief. A sour one meant betrayal. You didn't just taste salt, you listened to it. But there's another layer here. The way salt dries things out preserves them. Yes, but it also draws moisture, heat, sweat. That's why it was used in love rituals. It activated the skin, made mouths water, pulled desire from the inside out. Women would soak scarves in brine mixed with hibiscus, let them dry in the sun, and wear them close to the chest during courtship dances. Men would line their collars with salted wax and cinnamon oil, hoping the scent would leave a trail someone couldn't resist following. And let's not overlook the most compelling part. Salt hurts. Just a little. A nick on your lip, a grain on your tongue, it stings before it melts. That's why it's the perfect metaphor for seduction. It's not gentle, it's not always sweet, but it lingers, it stains, it preserves. Like that one night you can't forget, even if the name's long gone. You sit now on the edge of the lake, toes in the warm pink water. The sachet of imbegel still in your hand, the wind carrying distant drumming across the flats. Somewhere nearby, someone is whispering into someone else's neck. Somewhere, another pinch of salt is being offered with a sly smile and a dare. You haven't even tasted yours yet. But the night already feels warmer. The heat has changed again, more metallic now, like rain on bronze or blood on a ceremonial blade. You find yourself walking under towering red walls deep within the kingdom of Benin, where every inch seems carved or cast in memory. The palace hums with hidden energies, guards with eyes like flint, courtiers draped in coral beads, and everywhere bronze, cold, heavy, gleaming with centuries of breath and touch. But don't be fooled by the statue's stillness. These aren't just artistic relics. They're erotically coded, magically activated, politically dangerous. In Benin, sculpture wasn't passive. It was power. And some of these bronzes weren't meant to be admired. They were meant to arouse, protect, seduce, and sometimes punish. You reach a courtyard where an artist is working molten metal into a mold shaped like a slender torso, the hips exaggerated, the navel hollow. You ask what it's for. He smiles. "For remembering," he says. And then softly, "For stirring." Historians still argue whether these so-called body bronzes were strictly devotional or double agents of desire. But many believe they were more than just ornamental. Some were embedded with ground herbs, hidden capsules of dried clove or aphrodisiac bark sealed within the sculpture itself. When warmed by fire or breath, the scent released slowly, invisibly. Imagine a queen sitting beside one during an evening gathering, its curves mirroring hers, the scent curling around guests like a soft noose. You wouldn't even know why your pulse quickened. You'd just know you wanted to lean closer, and she'd be watching, not speaking, just watching. Here's your sex story. Oba Esigie, one of Benin's most cunning rulers, was known to host late-night debates with visiting nobles in his personal sculpture chamber. Each guest would sit opposite a different bronze figure, each one different in shape, expression, and scent. They weren't random. They were curated, matched to the psychological profile of each visitor. A proud general might face a statue with downcast eyes, challenging his dominance. A skittish merchant might meet a wide-hipped figure smiling gently, disarming his defenses. During one such night, Esegi served his guests palm wine laced with nutmeg and a syrup made from uedu, a plant known to thicken blood and dull fear. By dawn, all 5 guests had pledged tribute, and one had left behind his wedding ring, muttering that his bride now lived in bronze. No one ever saw him marry. The statue remains in the palace, warm to the touch, even in the dead of Harmattan. Now for your fringe tidbit. Benin bronze artists were often initiated into secret guilds, and part of their rite involved creating an offering of hunger, a small figurine sculpted during a fast, then hidden beneath the bed of a desired lover. Not to harm, not even to seduce directly, but to invite dreams. These talismans were believed to cause the target to dream of the artist repeatedly, increasing desire with each appearance. If the dreams continued for 3 nights, tradition allowed the artist to present himself in daylight with a gift and a challenge. Did I stir your sleep? If she said yes, the courtship could begin. If no, the figurine was melted down at the next full moon. But the deeper magic wasn't just in the object, it was in the gaze. Every bronze bore deliberate eye contact. Some direct, some averted, some half-lidded. This was key. They weren't just seen, they were seeing. In some traditions, couples would place small bronze faces beneath their bedding, facing upward, believing that the sculptures would witness their union and bless it with strength or fertility. Or, in one extreme belief, amplify the pleasure by sharing it psychically. Whether or not that's true, one scribe recorded a noble couple claiming they reached ecstasy with eyes closed, but never alone. And here's something you didn't expect: the scent trails. Some bronzes were rubbed with a special balm made from kola nut, charcoal, and bush pepper. When heated, it released a musky odor that lingered on the skin and in clothing. This scent was said to follow a person like a question they couldn't answer, haunting dreams and disrupting focus. It was often used during arranged marriages where one party was hesitant. After enough exposure, refusal became difficult, not from manipulation, but from desire misdirected. "I thought I didn't want her," one man confessed in a folk tale, "but her scent became my language." It wasn't the woman herself. It was the bronze, the oil, the firelight. Love, or something like it, forged in metallurgy and mood. You sit now beside a drying cast, still warm, the shape unfinished. The artist dips a cloth into the balm and wipes it gently over the bronze's chest. The scent rises, hot and peppery, and your breath catches. The figure hasn't moved, and yet it feels like it's watching you, not accusing, just waiting. There's a haze in the air now, velvety and sweet, and it sticks to your eyelashes like pollen or dreams you haven't earned. You're deeper inland, farther south, where the nights stretch long and the trees seem to hum under their own breath. This is Yoruba country, and while the sun rests, the smoke rises. Not fire smoke. This is ritual smoke, blue as twilight, and perfumed with crushed blossoms and ancestral ash. You're in the presence of a priestess known only as Iya Oloja, and tonight she's preparing a dream. That's what they call it here, Ala Oyinbo, a smoke blend said to call forth the lover you are destined to meet. Not in person yet, first in sleep. If they return to your dreams 3 nights in a row, you are fated. And if not, you still wake up smelling like hibiscus and orange bark, which isn't the worst thing to happen in bed. She grinds petals with slow, circular pressure, humming a tune that's half lullaby, half command. She folds in dried yam leaf, a bit of kola nut, and a few drops of palm wine, then places it all on a hot stone. The mixture begins to smolder, releasing tendrils of smoke so fragrant your thoughts blur around the edges. Historians still argue whether this tradition was purely symbolic or if it involved low-grade hallucinogens carried in the pollen. But what's not disputed is the impact. The smoke was taken seriously, often used before arranged marriages to gauge compatibility or sabotage it, depending on who was holding the ember. You feel your body relax, your eyelids heavier, and that's when she tells you the rules. No talking after the third inhale. No glancing into mirrors. And if you feel someone kiss your forehead as you drift off, do not open your eyes. That's how spirits slip inside. Here's your sex story, or maybe your dream story. A legend tells of a hunter named Seo, who inhaled the smoke one night before traveling to war. He dreamt of a woman in a green wrapper, always walking ahead of him through a garden he didn't recognize. Every time he called out, she turned, but her face was always obscured by mist. After 3 nights, the dreams stopped. Seo returned home 6 months later and walked through a village he'd never visited before. A woman stepped out of her hut carrying firewood, wearing the same green wrapper. She turned to greet him, and the mist cleared. They married within the month. But here's the twist. Every full moon, Seo would disappear from his home for one night. His wife never asked where, and she never saw him sleep. Now for your fringe tidbit. Some versions of the smoke ritual weren't about calling a new lover, but banishing an old one, specifically memories of them. The smoke mixture was altered, more bitter roots, a drop of snake venom diluted in goat milk, and charcoal drawn from lightning-struck trees. The person seeking release would inhale 3 times, then bury the ashes under their bed. If successful, they would wake up unable to recall their ex-lover's voice. After 7 days, even the name would blur. But there's one recorded case of it backfiring. A woman used the smoke to forget a man she believed had cursed her with longing. The ritual worked too well. She not only forgot him, she forgot her own name for 3 days, and when it returned, it was not the same name her parents had given her. There's also the curious matter of the dream herbs. Iya Oloja shows you a dried vine wrapped in gold thread, Ewe Ala, said to cause prophetic visions when burned on Fridays. But the visions only come if your feet are bare and your heart is quiet. The exact recipe is closely guarded, passed only between high-ranking priestesses. But the ritual itself is open. You light the vine at dusk, let the smoke touch your chest, and whisper a question to the sky. If your question concerns love, you must sleep facing east. West is for revenge. South for luck. North is forbidden, too close to the ancestors. And if you get it wrong, you may find yourself waking up with hands that smell like someone else's past. But maybe the most remarkable part of all this isn't the mystery. It's the intention. Unlike modern love spells that promise domination or instant attraction, the Yoruba dream smoke was gentle, invitational. It didn't force love. It revealed it, or warned you, or closed the door gently without slamming it. Love, after all, was not just physical. It was memory, spirit, the scent you carried in your hair after a sacred night. And sometimes it was best left in smoke. You lie now on a woven mat, head heavy, breath slow. The smoke curls around your ears like whispered names. The fire crackles. The priestess sits nearby, singing softly in a language you almost remember. You close your eyes. You think you hear footsteps. You think you feel a kiss. You do not open them. The smoke fades, but the air stays thick, damp now, humid with the kind of weight that sticks to your collarbone and makes your thoughts slow to crawl. You are no longer inland. You've stepped into the tangled green lungs of Madagascar, where vines drape like silk over the shoulders of sleeping giants, and the forest doesn't whisper. It listens. The moon filters in through foliage so dense it looks like stained glass, casting your path in jade and silver. And somewhere ahead, laughter. High, lilting, like someone drunk on secrets. You follow it, because of course you do, and find yourself in a clearing where three women sit cross-legged, palms stained red, lips glossy from some recent indulgence. In the center of their circle lies a fruit, not large, not bright, just round and pale, almost gray under the moonlight. You'd overlook it at a market, but they don't. They watch it like it might hatch or sing. One of them lifts it, slices it open, and the scent bursts like a soft punch. Vanilla, musk, and something sharp like fermented honey. She catches your gaze and smiles. "Moon fruit," she says. "We only harvest it when it sings back." The fruit is real, known locally as Voankazo misandratra. It blooms only during full moons in the humid heart of Madagascar's rainforests and must be plucked within 1 hour of opening, or it withers. Its pulp is sweet but slippery, with a faint fizz on the tongue. Locals say it warms the stomach and wakes the thighs. Historians still argue whether its chemical makeup has any scientifically proven aphrodisiac properties, but here, nobody doubts its power. It's not sold. It's gifted, and only to those considered worthy or daring. And tonight, apparently, that includes you. Here's your sex story. A folk tale tells of a healer named Rabbearivelo, who once seduced a visiting governor's wife not with words or gifts, but by offering her a moon fruit carved into the shape of a heart. She ate it in silence while he played a wooden flute. No declarations, no contact, just fruit and music. Later that night, she left her embroidered slippers outside his hut, a gesture of invitation so intimate in Malagasy culture it bordered on scandalous. They were never discovered together, but she bore a child 9 months later with his exact eyes, and to this day, descendants of that child are said to hum flute melodies in their sleep. Now for your fringe tidbit. The juice of the moon fruit was sometimes used in what were called twilight teas, infusions served in carved coconut shells, often at the end of long ceremonies, meant to soften the body and open the heart. But here's the twist. These teas were never drunk alone. They were passed between pairs, friends, lovers, strangers, who would each sip, press their foreheads together, and share a story they'd never told anyone. It was believed the tea opened a pathway between spirits, allowing truths to travel safely. One colonial officer documented attending such a ceremony disguised as a local. After sipping the tea, he confessed to the stranger beside him that he no longer believed in the empire he served. 2 days later, he deserted, joined a fishing village, married a woman who made moon fruit jam. The fruit's rarity adds to its mythos. Botanists still struggle to replicate its bloom cycle, and even local gatherers admit it often plays tricks, appearing ripe, then vanishing, or refusing to sweeten if harvested without proper song. Yes, song. The women who pick it do so while singing soft chants that, to outsiders, sound like lullabies. But the lyrics speak of longing, of loss, of fire kept secret. One line repeats, "Whoever eats you must return, even if it is only in a dream." That line alone is carved into more than one village doorframe. And let's not forget the games. In some regions, moon fruit is used in courtship rituals where couples must balance a slice of the fruit between their lips without using hands. If the fruit falls, they must wait another full moon before attempting again. If they succeed, they're considered aligned, spiritually, emotionally, erotically. One couple was said to have balanced the fruit for 3 full minutes while blindfolded. They married the next week and, according to neighbors, have not stopped dancing since. You sit now with the women in the clearing. One presses a slice into your hand, her fingers warm and sticky. You bite. The taste is indescribable, not just sweet, but familiar, like the memory of someone you haven't met yet. Your skin tingles, not in a movie way, in a cellular way, like something ancient just woke up inside your bloodstream and is looking around. You don't know what you're supposed to feel, but you feel, and tonight, that's more than enough. The jungle has fallen away now, replaced by walls painted with shadow and silk. The air is saturated with something softer, more complex, like a perfume you can't quite name but suddenly need to follow. You're in northern Nigeria, in a quiet room behind a bustling market, where the scent of smoked meat and dust fades into jasmine, sandalwood, and citrus oils so rich they stick behind your ears long after the door is closed. You've just entered a Bori perfume room, a sacred secret space where Hausa women brew not just fragrance but seduction in liquid form. And this, you realize, is not a boutique. It's a laboratory of longing. They call it Turaren Wuta, fire perfume. And it's not something you spray on a wrist. No, this is perfume that you burn, inhale, bathe in, pray with, flirt through. It's made from groundwoods, dried flowers, crushed seeds, amber resin, and incense that's been steeped in rituals older than the borders drawn around them. Some of these recipes are whispered from mother to daughter only once. Some are never spoken aloud at all. You see a woman lean over a brazier, drop in a pinch of powder, and let the smoke rise between her legs as she closes her eyes. It's not about smelling good. It's about being unforgettable. Here's your sex story. A widow named Asma'u, famous in her village for her stoic mourning, once walked into the market in a plain wrap and left with nothing but a satchel of rare perfume paste and a knowing smile. That evening, the emir's son, who'd never once spoken to her, appeared at her compound and refused to leave. Witnesses say he knelt beside her fire, silent, just breathing. When asked what had happened, he could only whisper, "She smelled like every promise I didn't know I'd made." They married a month later, scandalizing the court. She never revealed what blend she wore. It's known now only as kulawa, meaning attention. But this isn't fantasy. The science of scent is ancient here. In Hausa tradition, perfumes are categorized by their emotional effect. Sanyi, for cooling calm; Zafi, for heat and boldness; Dadi, for pleasure; and Karfi, for strength of body, will, or libido. The ingredients are chosen not just for aroma, but for their vibrational properties. Sandalwood grounds, musk attracts, clove warms, and some, like udan mata, literally women's secret, are believed to heighten sexual response when heated and inhaled before intimacy. Historians still argue whether these ingredients had genuine aphrodisiac properties or whether the ritual of application was the true activator. But either way, the result was powerful enough that colonial officers once banned certain Hausa perfumes from being worn near administrative buildings, fearing they caused unprofessional distractions. Now for your fringe tidbit. There's a little-known ritual known as Zama da Turare, sitting with perfume. It involves a woman sitting alone in a closed room filled with smoldering incense for hours, meditating on a specific desire. Some believe the smoke absorbs that desire and carries it outward to seek its target. It's not always used for romance. Some use it for protection. But the most whispered stories are those of women who burned specific perfumes for 7 nights in a row and claimed their desired lover arrived on the 8th, uninvited but unmistakably affected. One account even details a foreign merchant who came to trade leather and left 6 weeks later married, perfumed, and fluent in Hausa, saying, "The air changed me, and the beauty is in the details." The jars are clay, sealed with beeswax. The pastes shimmer with crushed mica. The oils stain fingertips. Nothing about this is passive. It's chemistry, it's culture, it's seduction with a scholar's precision. Women who master the art of perfume blending are highly respected, often called upon to bless marriages, calm disputes, or reignite the interest of husbands who've wandered emotionally or otherwise. They are chemists of intimacy, choreographers of scent. And you, right now, are watching one swirl a copper spoon through a vat of oil so fragrant it makes your eyes water. She dabs a bit behind your ear. Just one drop. And your heartbeat stutters like a skipped record. There's power in that. The kind that doesn't announce itself but enters a room first, The kind that changes the way someone hears your voice or sees your hands move. And unlike spells or potions, you can wear this in broad daylight. It's not about trickery, it's about magnetism. Your energy distilled, amplified, and made liquid. You walk out of the perfume room feeling taller, softer, sharper. The street noise hits you like a wave, but you carry the hush of that hidden space with you. Someone passes and turns their head. You say nothing. You don't have to. The wind is different out here. Open, cooler, tinged with dust and milk. You're in Somali territory now, where the land stretches wide and uncluttered, like a breath taken after too many hours in tight rooms. The sky feels close enough to touch, and the horizon doesn't end. It just fades. Here, intimacy doesn't arrive in sudden bursts, but in slow rituals passed between people who have learned to speak without rushing. You're outside a circular hut made of woven reeds and camel skin, watching a pot bubble over an open fire. Inside that pot, camel milk. But not just any milk. This has been fermented, spiced, and stirred for hours with crushed cardamom, date paste, and, strangest of all, a pinch of powdered coral stone. The woman preparing it hums to herself, then ladles the drink into a wooden bowl and hands it to you. "For strength," she says. But then she adds, "For loyalty, too." That's when you realize this isn't breakfast. This is a vow. In Somali folklore, fermented camel milk, garub, has long been used in ceremonies of union, not just between lovers but between allies. It's shared before war, before travel, before marriage. But in intimate settings, it becomes something else, a contract of the body. When drunk under specific conditions, most notably beneath a blood moon and after reciting a private verse, it's said to bind the drinker's fates for life, not through magic, through memory, because you'll never forget the taste, the texture, the way your tongue recognized something primal in its sour, sweet burn. Historians still argue whether the chemical changes from fermentation had any emotional effect, or if the drink's power lies in its ritualized repetition. But in oral history, the evidence is overwhelming. People don't just remember who they drank it with, they return to them again and again, as if pulled by something stronger than choice. Here's your sex story. A herder named Warsame was known for refusing every marriage proposal sent his way, claiming no woman could outrun his solitude. But during a rain ceremony, he met a woman named Sahra, who offered him a bowl of garub without speaking. He drank. She drank. Neither spoke for the rest of the evening. That night, they lay side by side under a woven mat, back to back, saying nothing. The next morning, he brought her his finest goat. A week later, they married. But here's the part villagers still whisper. Every year on the anniversary of that night, Warsame would walk to the same fire pit, boil the same milk, and place 2 bowls in the sand. One for him, one untouched. Even after Sarah passed, he kept the ritual. "Because she still listens," he said, "and I still speak." Now for your fringe tidbit. Some elders tell of a rare variant of garub known as red milk, which includes drops of pomegranate juice, a crushed clove, and a splash of the drinker's own tears. It's not made for consumption. It's made for anointing. Lovers would use it to trace lines down each other's arms, across the chest, or along the jaw, believing the blend sealed promises into the skin. The mark fades. The vow doesn't. One folktale tells of a man who tried to break such a promise and found himself unable to taste anything sweet for 7 years. Whether metaphor or curse, no one risks it twice. But let's return to the moon. The blood moon specifically, which plays a starring role in many Somali intimacy rites. During such a night, couples seeking to lock hearts would exchange drinks beneath a canopy made of goat leather and woven grass. The verses whispered before drinking varied, but one was common. "If I forget you, let the land forget me." That's not romance. That's anchor. In a landscape where people often disappear into the wind, where lovers ride away on camels and don't return for months or years. The need for a ritual that makes someone unforgettable isn't just poetic, it's practical. And it's not just the drink, it's the silence around it. Somali love rituals often prize restraint over performance. A glance held longer than usual, a shared breath beneath the stars, a bowl passed with both hands. The absence of music becomes its own rhythm, the quiet between words, its own language. To Western ears, this might sound muted, unremarkable. But spend one evening watching two people boil milk together under a full moon without speaking, and you'll understand. There's no louder declaration of desire than effort shared in silence. You sit now beside the fire, the milk thick and steaming in your bowl. You sip. The taste is sharp, warm, a little wild. You feel it coat your throat, your belly, your memory. A voice beside you murmurs something soft, a verse, a vow. You don't speak. You just hold the bowl a little tighter. The silence breaks with a drumbeat, not one you hear, but one you feel deep in the ribs, like someone tapping on the inside of your chest. The sun has risen, and you're not easing into this one. You're dropped right into the heart of Zulu territory, and the rhythm here doesn't wait. It charges. This isn't a seduction built on whispers. This is heat, dust, sweat. You're standing at the edge of a training circle where young warriors, bare-chested, breath steaming, move in unison, their feet pounding the red soil in a ritual dance older than their scars. But don't be fooled by the choreographed violence. This is a rite of passage, yes, but it's also a test of readiness. And hidden within this thunderous trial is a surprisingly tender, weirdly sweet secret weapon, a paste that burns like pepper, cools like mint, and tastes vaguely like honey left in the sun too long. It's the warrior's aphrodisiac, prepared with thornbush sap, wildflower resin, and mashed sugarcane. You're handed a dab on a carved wooden stick and told to place it under your tongue. You do, and it hits. Historians still argue whether the real effect of the Zulu warrior paste was physiological or psychological, but one thing's clear. It was never just about arousal. It was about clarity, stamina, and the ability to channel desire into purpose. When you're young, angry, and trained for war, the line between lust and aggression is thin. This paste blurred it further, or sharpened it depending on how you used it. Some say it made warriors bolder in battle. Others say it made them reckless in love. Both might be true. Here's your sex story. A tale from a village elder about a warrior named Makokeli, who was undefeated in spear trials but hopeless in matters of the heart. Until one night, after a grueling test, he was invited to the women's enclosure, a rare honor. There, a healer named Thobeka applied the paste directly to his tongue and whispered, "Now speak only what your body already knows." That night, he didn't speak at all. He danced, with her, around the fire, through the long grass, until dawn. By morning, he was no longer feared. He was followed, by warriors who wanted to move like him, and by women who wanted to know what dreams tasted like when seasoned with sweat and honey. Now for your fringe tidbit. Zulu thorn bushes were often planted around homesteads for protection, but during certain fertility festivals, young men would gather the thorns and boil them into a bitter tea. This tea wasn't drunk. It was poured over the chest in a private ritual meant to toughen the heart. Afterwards, a drop of the warrior paste was placed on the tongue. This combination was said to protect against false love. Any desire that didn't survive the burn wasn't worth chasing. One old tale says a man once skipped the thorn tea and fell for a woman who disappeared the next morning, taking his best spear and half the goat herd. He returned to the ritual the next season and never skipped it again. But the real artistry of this tradition lies in how raw and refined it is at once. Everything is felt through the body: movement, heat, rhythm, ache. There are no love letters here, no quiet perfumes, no dream herbs. Here, Desire is proved through action, through the way a man moves in battle, how long he can hold a gaze without blinking, whether he has the patience to apply the paste properly without flinching. In this context, love isn't whispered. It's announced with drum beats and answered with steps. You don't flirt, you challenge. And the response, if returned, is just as fierce. Even the ingredients of the paste reflect this contradiction. Thorn sap, pain; sugarcane, pleasure; mint leaf, clarity; wildflower resin, mystery. It's a sensory seesaw, forcing the body to interpret conflicting signals and, in doing so, heighten awareness. You're not just turned on, you're turned in. Alert to breath, weight, sound, heat. Every glance becomes an invitation. Every movement, a promise. You watch now as the warriors finish their trial, sweat painting their shoulders in dark streaks, dust clinging to their calves. One turns, catches your eye, and grins, not out of arrogance, but recognition. He sees what you've tasted. And you understand, viscerally, that this paste wasn't made for pleasure alone. It was made to bind people to their purpose, whether that's love, loyalty, or simply the courage to say yes when someone dances their truth into the firelight. The beat fades, the drums echo out into memory, and now the night stretches strange and wide. You're walking along a desert path lined with flickering lanterns, shadows stretching taller than the camels resting by makeshift stalls. You've arrived in the old city of Timbuktu, not the dusty cliché you've seen in faded textbooks, but the real one, pulsing quietly under layers of starlight and forbidden knowledge. By day, this is a city of scholars and scribes, where the libraries hold centuries of astronomical notes and philosophical treatises. But at night, when the markets close and the students sleep, another market opens, whispered about, but never mapped. The night market. You follow the trail past the mosque, past the sleeping goats and murmuring fountains, until a curtain of woven beads parts in front of you. Welcome to the night market of Timbuktu, where truth and temptation share the same price tag. Here, under low canopies and beside smoky fires, sellers don't just hawk trinkets. They offer dried herbs wrapped in scrolls, old charms sealed in leather, and something called pleasure dust, a mix of cinnamon, crushed tamarind seed, and an herb that smells like wet stone and burnt honey. But more intriguing than the powders are the scrolls. Paper, brittle with age, covered in calligraphy so delicate it looks like it was breathed rather than written. You pick one up. It's not a religious text. It's a love spell, equal parts poem and instruction manual, written in a mix of Arabic and Soninke, wrapped around a bundle of dried rose hips. One vendor leans in and tells you, "This was banned by 2 emirs and 1 French governor." Then he adds, "It works best when read aloud to someone asleep." He doesn't explain. He doesn't need to. Historians still argue whether these scrolls were the remnants of pre-Islamic traditions hidden under Sufi mysticism, or simply the romantic outbursts of bored scribes with too much ink and not enough affection. But the truth is, these scrolls were more than erotica. They were maps, directions for how to guide the heart through darkness, how to awaken longing with words alone. Some included coded symbols, stars, moons, flame shapes, each representing a different kind of touch or tension. One scroll, found tucked inside an old ledger, contained a sequence of symbols translated as, "To summon desire, rub this leaf with honey, and read this name under breath until the wind shifts." The name was worn away, lost to time. But the scroll still smells faintly of jasmine and regret. Here's your sex story. A scribe named Bakir fell in love with a woman he only saw once. Passing by the mosque in a blue shawl, her face hidden, but her eyes catching his like a hook. He wrote her a scroll, 100 lines long, each line a metaphor more audacious than the last. He soaked the parchment in orange water, rolled it tight, and placed it inside a book of legal commentary he knew she would borrow from the public library. She found it, read it, said nothing, but returned the next day with a scroll of her own. It was shorter, only one line. Your metaphors are brave. Come find me when your hands are just as bold. They married, or they didn't. The story ends with the line, he became a man who learned to write without looking at the page. Now for your fringe tidbit. Some of the night market's most prized items are the pleasure seals, small wooden stamps carved with phrases in ancient script, meant to be inked with saffron or soot and pressed onto inner arms, thighs, or beneath the tongue. When heated by breath or sweat, the ink releases scent and, allegedly, energy. One seal, inscribed with the phrase, "I remember your breath," was said to cause involuntary shivers when touched. Another, simply marked with a crescent moon, had a reputation for drawing back former lovers, or, less romantically, for making the wearer dream of people they hadn't seen in years. One woman reportedly pressed a seal on her thigh and dreamt of her childhood best friend for 6 nights straight. On the 7th, the friend knocked on her door, having traveled from a city 5 days away. Coincidence, maybe. Or maybe that's what this market trades in best, coincidences dressed as fate. And it's not all history. Even today, descendants of these traders still whisper about night ink, a blend of fig bark and charcoal used to write notes that only appear under moonlight. Lovers would use it to leave messages on stones or doorway lintels. When the moon was full, the letters would appear, briefly, just long enough. Like feelings we wish we could keep hidden, but always find their own moment to burn through. You leave the stall with a scroll in your pocket, the ink already warming from your skin. You don't read it right away. You want the timing to feel accidental, intentional. Like everything else in this market, it's not about the object. It's about what you'll do with it once the lights go out. You don't remember leaving the market, but suddenly the air is wet and soft, and your feet are sunk ankle deep in something that feels like velvet, but smells like clay and smoke. You're on the banks of a river somewhere in Burkina Faso, where the Mossy people have long whispered about a place known simply as the Fire Clay Baths. This isn't a spa. It's not even public. It's a sacred site, hidden behind dense undergrowth and lined with stones that hold the heat long after the fire has died. You follow the glow, and there they are. Figures moving in silhouette, half covered in red clay, their laughter low, their gestures slow and deliberate like dance. The scent is unmistakable. Chili bark, river silt, and something sweet like roasted cassava. You've arrived at the ritual of fire bathing, not just a cleansing, but a heat ritual designed to awaken the body in every possible sense. You're handed a gourd filled with a thick, soupy mixture. It looks like rust. It tastes like earth and cinnamon. It's made from a clay harvested upriver, spiked with ground chili, marula oil, and bark ash. The first sip makes your eyes water. The second warms your stomach. The third, that's the one that unspools your spine. Historians still argue whether the mossy fire clay contained natural stimulants or simply acted through intense sensory activation. Whatever the truth, the people who performed this rite didn't need science to explain what they felt. They called it tam soaba, the stirring of the inner skin, a readiness, a kind of trembling that wasn't fear, but anticipation so sharp it made your teeth hum. Here's your sex story. In one remembered tale, a midwife named Komwinde was said to be able to predict the fertility of any couple based on how they handled the fire clay bath. If they flinched at the heat, she would shake her head. If they laughed, or sighed, or moved toward one another without words, she would declare them brought by the river. One night, a couple visited her hut, newly betrothed, skeptical of tradition. Komwinde invited them into the clay bath, each to sit in a pool laced with separate herbs. They were instructed not to touch each other. Just sit. After 10 minutes, The man began to cry. Not out of pain, out of release. The woman touched his arm without thinking. Comwinde smiled. "You'll have twins," she said. And they did. 3 times. Now for your fringe tidbit. The clay wasn't just ingested or soaked in, it was also painted. Not for decoration, for transmission. Elders would paint small sigils on the collarbone, the back of the neck, the tops of thighs. Each mark meant something: openness, courage, longing. The pigment would crack as it dried, and the pattern of the cracks was read like a map of the heart. One mark, shaped like a spiral and placed just below the belly button, was believed to increase sensual dreams when worn overnight. People would wake up flushed, breathless, needing to touch something, or someone. Often they would return to the river that day, as if magnetized. And if they met someone else doing the same, well, let's just say the river heard many vows whispered under its reeds. And then there's the fire itself. This isn't a gentle warmth. The bath stones are heated until they hiss, then cooled slightly with river water. The result? Steam so thick it curls around your ears and makes the night sound like it's breathing. You're instructed to enter slowly, to let the steam touch your face before your body, to surrender. That's the word they use. Not bathe, not wash, surrender. Because the heat breaks you open just enough to feel everything more vividly. Touch becomes music. Breath becomes weight. A hand on your shoulder is no longer just a hand. It's a declaration. You sit now in the shallows, the clay slick on your skin, your chest still glowing from the gourd's fire. Across from you, another bather meets your eyes, says nothing, smiles. You don't know their name. You don't need to. The river remembers. The water cools, but your skin still carries the hum of heat as you emerge from the river and into silence. A different kind of silence now. One that buzzes beneath the surface, the kind you hear only when someone is watching you without blinking. You're in the royal compound of the she-king of the Great Lakes, a sovereign remembered in fragmented stories, whose rule blurred the lines between gender, memory, and magic. No one agrees on her birth name. Some say she was born male, raised female. Others claim the opposite. What all stories agree on is this: she ruled absolutely, desired unapologetically, and guarded a tincture so powerful it could erase the memory of pain or of passion. You're led into a chamber where walls are lined with mirrors, not glass, but polished copper, warped and burnished, so every reflection shivers just slightly. You can't tell where your face ends and someone else's begins. In the center of the room, a bowl of liquid gleams gold under torchlight. It's the she-king's feather tincture, a concoction prepared only during eclipses using dew collected from eagle feathers, honey smoked with myrrh, and a rare orchid that blooms for 1 hour each year. To drink it is to forget, but to be anointed with it, that's something else entirely. Historians still argue whether the tincture was real or a symbolic invention, perhaps a metaphor for the way the she-king's lovers seemed to forget everything but her. She was said to seduce with no voice, no touch, just presence. And when she chose someone, she didn't take them. She invited them to remember her, then removed the memory once it was no longer useful. One scribe noted that the she-king had dozens of lovers, and no one with regrets. That alone might be the most powerful spell of all. Here's your sex story. A visiting oracle once challenged the she-king in public, claiming no potion could override true emotion. The she-king invited them to share a meal. Pomegranate, grilled fish. The feather tincture stirred into a rosewater glaze. They ate. They laughed. They disappeared for 3 nights. When the oracle returned, they had forgotten the she-king's name, but wrote poems in a language they had never spoken before. One line remains inscribed on the floor of an abandoned bathhouse. I forgot your name, but not how you touch the world. Now for your fringe tidbit. Some scholars believe the mirrors in the she-king's chamber were arranged according to lunar geometry, reflecting moonlight through tincture bowls to activate the memory-altering properties. Whether mystical or not, the psychological effect was undeniable. Visitors often reported seeing faces in the copper that weren't their own. Some said they glimpsed past lovers. Others said they saw themselves as children, or as they wished to be. One foreign general reportedly knelt before his reflection and began apologizing to someone who wasn't in the room. He resigned the next morning and took a vow of silence. The tincture, it seems, didn't just erase, it revealed. And then there's the application. You don't drink it. Not if you want the real effect. A single drop placed on the tongue is for forgetting, but to remember more sharply, more intensely. The drop is painted on the inside of the wrist, or along the collarbone, or, most intimately, between the eyes. There, it's said to open the third vision, to make a moment feel so vivid it becomes eternal. One kiss after anointing could haunt a person for decades, like music you can't name but hum in your sleep. One touch, and a name you never knew becomes the answer to every question. You sit now in the she-king's chamber. She is not here. Or maybe she is, reflected in 20 different glimmers at once. The bowl of tincture pulses like a heartbeat. A hand offers you a feather dipped in gold. You close your eyes. The feather brushes your skin. And for a moment, you forget why you came. But you'll remember this feeling forever. There's salt on your lips again. But this time it isn't from the desert or tears. It's from the ocean, thick and alive in the air as you step onto a slick stone pier where lanterns sway in the wind like flirtatious nods. You've made your way east to the Swahili coast, where everything breathes spice and rhythm and a kind of slow-burning heat that lives in the gaps between conversation. This isn't a place of shouting desire. This is where seduction walks barefoot, taking its time. You pass coral-walled houses, wooden doors carved with patterns so intricate they seem to move if you stare too long. You follow the scent of cloves, sharp, sweet, and just shy of overwhelming, until you find yourself in a courtyard where sailors lie sprawled on cushions, drinking spiced tea and exhaling stories like smoke. One of them beckons you. He holds out a carved wooden box. Inside, cloves, sticky with oil and glinting like tiny dark embers. For the oath, he says, if you dare. On this coast, cloves aren't just a crop or a commodity. They're a currency of longing. Swahili lovers have long infused them into oils, chewed them before a kiss, burned them in tiny fires lit between bedposts. The ritual is simple but precise. Two people sit facing each other, knees touching, a single clove held between their lips. They must bite at the same time and then whisper a wish, one only spoken if the clove is still whole. If it cracks, the wish is swallowed instead, stored in the blood. Some believe these oaths can tie souls across oceans. Others say they do nothing, unless you believe they do. But isn't that the essence of every aphrodisiac? Historians still argue whether the clove rituals were ancient or adopted from Indian and Arab trade influences, but the Swahili turned them into something wholly their own. There are folk tales of lovers whispering to cloves before tucking them behind a partner's ear. If worn for 3 days without falling, the wearer would dream of the whisper every night. One tale even claims that a woman in Zanzibar once sang a single note into a clove and hid it in her lover's shoe. He followed the sound in his dreams and walked 5 nights without sleep to return to her doorstep. Here's your sex story. A pearl diver named Amini once courted the daughter of a perfumer, a woman known for distilling clove oil so potent it could perfume an entire alley. He wrote her letters she never read. So he changed tactics. He bought a fresh batch of cloves, soaked them in rose water, then pressed one into a letter with no words, just his fingerprint, oiled and red. She wore it on a necklace for a week. On the 7th night, she appeared at his door holding her own clove, dipped in jasmine. They said nothing, just exchanged cloves. They say they've never raised their voices to each other since. But every month, they chew a clove in silence at sunset, in case the wish hasn't finished traveling. Now for your fringe tidbit. In Lamu and Mombasa, there's a hidden practice known as pua mbili, 2 noses. It involves a lover secretly placing 2 cloves beneath their partner's pillow, one oiled, one dry. If the partner wakes from a dream and correctly names the scent, sweet, bitter, spicy, smoky, it's seen as proof of emotional alignment. If they fail, the cloves are buried by the sea, and the couple must sleep apart for 3 nights. It's less punishment than reset. A reminder that love, like scent, must be actively perceived. One woman told a researcher, "My husband and I have failed the test 4 times in 20 years. Each time we loved better after." But cloves aren't just ritual. They're sensory dynamite. When chewed, they numb the tongue slightly, heighten heat perception, and leave a lingering warmth in the mouth. Perfect, you might say, for kisses that intend to linger. The oil can be rubbed onto the wrists, into the hair, or mixed with coconut for massage blends used in wedding night rites. The sensation? Tingling, burning, addictive. Some say it makes the body hum like a prayer bowl struck gently. Some say it just smells like home. You sit now in the courtyard. Someone offers you a cup of warm milk steeped with clove and sugar. The kind children drink to sleep. The kind lovers drink to dream the same dream. You sip. The warmth pools behind your eyes. A breeze shifts. You glance to your side, and someone is already watching. The sea air fades into stillness now, but something electric lingers, like static in silk or the crackle right before a candle goes out. You've drifted inland again, deep into the forests of the Congo Kingdom, where nothing is loud, but everything is alive. The trees here arch like cathedral ceilings, their bark peeling in layers that look suspiciously like skin. Somewhere between the vines and shadows is a small hut, its roof thatched, its walls painted with red symbols that glow faintly when the moonlight catches them. You approach not with footsteps, but with instinct. This is a mirror house, and tonight, the priest inside will teach you how to bend desire with reflection. Not through charm or touch, but through something older and more precise. The act of stealing lust from light, from you're welcomed inside, and it's darker than expected. Mirrors everywhere, but not ones that show your face straight. Each is slightly warped, reflecting you back like a memory reassembled by someone else. In the center of the room lies a large mirror slab, cold and smooth, and beside it, a bowl of herbs crushed to paste, mint, charcoal, dried hibiscus, and a rare root called mpese, believed to attract what the skin hides. The priest dips 2 fingers into the mixture and smears it across the mirror. Not you, not yet. First, the mirror must be fed. In Congo belief, mirrors are not merely reflections. They are portals, messengers, tools for reading the invisible. Historians still argue whether these erotic mirror rites were practiced widely or belonged to a secret priestly caste, but stories remain. Stories of women who anointed their mirrors with desire balm and, upon gazing in, saw not themselves, but the faces of lovers long gone, or not yet met. Some even claimed that staring into the prepared mirror allowed them to feel the longing of others as if it were scent in the air. Not words, not thoughts, just want, distilled and glowing. Here's your sex story. A healer named Mbongeni once loved a man who belonged to another. So he did not touch. He did not speak. Instead, he prepared his mirror. Every night, for 7 nights, he applied a blend of smoked clove, river moss, and ashes from the man's burnt letter onto the mirror's frame. On the 8th night, he saw the man's face appear in the glass. Not in pain, not in confusion, just watching. That night, the man appeared at his door, said nothing, just rested his forehead against Mbongeni's chest and exhaled. They were never seen in public as a couple, but their mirrors, it said, always faced each other. Now for your fringe tidbit. There was a lesser-known ritual called Kuta ya Mwangaza, the lighting of vision, where lovers would sit on opposite sides of a mirror, each holding a candle. At midnight, they would blow their flames toward the glass simultaneously. If the flames flickered back at them, they were warned. Their desires were unbalanced. But if the flames disappeared in silence, it meant their hearts were moving in parallel, in rhythm. Couples who passed the test would press their palms to the mirror and whisper the other's name, not aloud, but just behind the lips, so the breath would fog the glass. Some said if you timed it just right, your lover's fog would meet yours and hang there, suspended like a promise that didn't need to be kept, just known. The real genius of the Congo mirror rite wasn't its complexity. It was the understanding that desire has a shape, a texture, that you can make someone feel it not by touch, but by how you carry it inside your own gaze. The mirrors didn't show beauty. They showed intention. And when your intention was painted in herbs and moonlight and longing, it had weight. A man once confessed that he couldn't meet his lover's eyes after a mirror rite because she looked at me like she already knew what I was going to remember about her. Tonight, you kneel before the slab. The priest hands you a feather. You dip it into the remaining balm, trace a circle on the glass. Your reflection shimmers, warps, and suddenly you're not looking at your face. You're looking at a moment that hasn't happened yet, but one that feels inevitable. You reach out. The glass is cold, but your chest is on fire. Something is shifting again, not in the air this time, but in your pulse, which has started to sync with a beat you can't hear but somehow know. You're walking now through the hills of what was once the Ashanti Empire, toward a gathering where drums don't call for war, but for harvest. The sun is low, golden and forgiving, and before you, stretched out like a woven spell, is the horn of plenty rite. It's not a single event. It's a ritual, a ceremony, a performance, all disguised as a festival. You see gourds stacked like trophies, baskets of yams braided with palm fronds, and at the center of it all, the dancers, barefoot, bare-shouldered, their limbs oiled and glowing like carved wood in firelight. The drumming builds, not with urgency, but with invitation. And that's when you spot it, the symbol of the night. A long, curved gourd tied with red cloth passed hand to hand like a sacred joke everyone is in on. This is the rite's most infamous moment, the fertility dance. Symbolic, yes, but not subtle. Each dancer takes the gourd, places it at their belly, their chest, or between their legs, and moves with it. Not crudely, creatively, sensually. The dance is improvised, but deeply rehearsed, a test of rhythm and confidence and wit. Historians still argue whether the rite's original purpose was agricultural blessing or erotic initiation, but what's certain is that no one leaves unchanged. The crowd doesn't just watch. They lean forward, matching breath to movement, laughter to rhythm. Even the elders smile knowingly. It's said that if someone dances with the gourd and your heart jumps, that's the person you're fated to crave. And you? Yours is already racing. Here's your sex story. A woman named Afua was known for never dancing. At every rite, she would sit, eyes sharp, smile quiet. But one year, during a particularly abundant harvest, she stood, took the gourd, and danced. No one laughed. No one breathed. Her movements were so fluid, so precise. It was as if the gourd had been waiting for her all along. At the end, she placed it at the feet of a merchant who'd been courting her for years. He wept. The next day, they wed, not in a chapel, but in the center of the field, with gourds strung like lanterns above them. To this day, the phrase Ifua's gourd is used to describe a love that arrives exactly when you stop expecting it. Now for your fringe tidbit. There's a lesser-known extension of the Horn of Plenty rite called listening to the drums. It happens after the dancing ends, when couples, or strangers, retreat into the yam storage houses and press their foreheads together, ear to ear. The belief is that the residual drumbeat in the air can carry secrets if you're quiet enough. Some swear they've heard confessions whispered into their skull. Others say the experience is less about sound and more about resonance, matching someone's breath until you're no longer sure which lungs belong to whom. One couple claimed they didn't speak for 3 years after the rite, yet remained closer than any pair in the village. Words would have ruined it, they said. We already heard everything we needed. But the heart of this ritual isn't just sensual, it's communal. Everyone plays a part. The drummers, the cooks, the children who chase butterflies around the gourds. It's not about secrecy, it's about shared vibration. About creating a space where longing is allowed to live out loud, adorned in beads and laughter and rhythm. Even the gourds themselves are chosen with care. Each is rubbed with a mix of palm oil, cola dust, and a bark powder known to tingle slightly on contact. The result? A tactile intimacy, one that lingers on the fingers long after the dance ends. And the drumming. Always the drumming. It never rushes. It teases. It swells and fades like someone testing your patience just to watch you ache. Some claim it triggers something in the nervous system, a kind of low-grade euphoria. One elder once said, "It reminds the body that it has a purpose beyond survival." And in that space between rhythm and release, every glance becomes a maybe, every laugh a dare, every step a proposal waiting for a partner. You sit now among the watchers, your heart still pulsing in time with the drum. The gourd passes near you, warm from another's hands. A dancer holds it up, raises an eyebrow, and waits. You don't know the steps, but you stand anyway, because maybe tonight your heartbeat wants to be heard. The drums fade behind you, but their echo clings to your ribcage like an aftershock, each beat trailing you into a new kind of silence, the kind that glitters. You're no longer near forests or farms. You're walking beneath stars that blink like slow secrets over dunes that breathe like waves. Welcome to Tuareg land, nomads of the Sahara, blue veils, silver eyes, and languages that taste like smoke and wind. Here, there is no fixed temple for love. The entire desert is the chapel. And in this cathedral of endless sand, seduction is a soft, deliberate act written into the skin itself. You're led to a tent, low and wide, walls dyed indigo and stitched with verses in Tamahak script. There's a woman inside, kneeling over a bowl filled with sand, ink, and camel urine. Not the introduction you expected, but she's smiling, and you're intrigued enough to sit. This is the beginning of the ink charm ritual, something you wouldn't find in tourist books or anthropology texts. The Tuareg call it taragalt, loosely translated as desert etching of longing. It involves a homemade ink made of powdered stone, charred date pits, and camel urine fermented with clove and myrrh. The scent is harsh at first, pungent, undeniably alive, but not unpleasant. She mixes it slowly, whispering verses that sound like hummingbirds speaking in Morse code. You watch as she dips a thin stick into the ink and begins drawing on her own thigh, just above the knee, a spiral, then a teardrop, then a crescent moon. She hands you the stick. You draw your desire where it will not forget you. Historians still argue whether this was strictly magical or partly medicinal. The ink's base has antiseptic properties, and some believe the ritual began as wound treatment turned symbolic. But among Tuareg women, the meaning is clear. To draw desire on the body is to tell it where to go. Some marks are for summoning, a star near the hip to call a lost lover. Others for silencing, an X across the ribs to forget someone who won't forget you. One pattern, a set of 3 dots trailing down the spine, is said to invite passion so specific it makes the body shake when touched in sleep. Yes, just sleep, for now. Here's your sex story. A woman named Tanafert was said to have inked a single word behind her ear, aghaf, meaning stay. She never told anyone whose name she whispered while the mark was drawn. But 3 years later, a man arrived in her camp from hundreds of kilometers away, claiming he saw her face every time he drank from his flask. When asked how he found her, he simply pointed at his own ear. He had an identical mark. Same word, same spot. They married without ceremony. When asked about the mark, she only said, "He listened." Now for your fringe tidbit. Some Tuareg tattoos weren't visible at all. They were drawn in sand ink across the soles of the feet during new moons, then immediately covered with leather sandals. The ink faded fast, but the impact was said to linger. These were known as one-decade charms, each one supposedly strong enough to draw a single lover once every 10 years. The belief was that the spell didn't control the lover, it simply tilted the road toward reunion. That's why those who used them often left their tents unlocked, their fires burning low, just in case. One elder recounted a tale of 2 women who used the same charm by accident. Their former lover returned, stayed for one night, then left again. When asked why, he replied, "Because I never stopped loving either of you, but my feet only brought me halfway." And there's something deeply poetic about this ritual being written on skin. Not told, not sung, not shown. The Tuareg understand that skin is memory, that the body remembers touches the mind can't quite explain. And so the act of inking desire becomes a collaboration between muscle and magic, a hope sent forward into time and distance with no guarantee of return. And maybe that's what makes it so powerful. Not the ingredients, not even the verses, but the willingness to speak without needing to be heard immediately, to trust that desire knows the way back. Now you sit under a low canopy, the ink bowl before you. Your guide hands you the stick. You hesitate. Then dip it. Your fingers trace a shape, not because you know what it means, but because it feels right. You press the pattern along your wrist, just beneath the pulse. As the ink dries, it itches slightly. A reminder that somewhere, someone might just be feeling it too. The sand has slipped from your skin, but something else remains, something playful now, mischievous even, like laughter echoing down a hallway you're not supposed to enter. You've wandered east again, into the kingdom of Buganda, where bananas grow fat and golden under a sun that seems to know too much. This is not a story of grand queens or mysterious priests. This is a story that starts with fruit. But not just any fruit. The banana, soft-skinned and blushing with innuendo, has been transformed here into something between education, ceremony, and flirtation. You're standing at the edge of a village square, and in the center, under a canopy of raffia and feathers, young brides are gathering for the banana game. You're not ready. You never will be. This is no children's game. This is a bridal rite known as Okuchina Amenvu, where the women of the community teach incoming brides how to prepare their husbands not with sermons, but with ripe bananas. The rules are unspoken but clear. Each bride is given a banana and a small knife. They must peel the fruit without breaking it, slice it without bruising it, and serve it without hesitation. Sounds simple. It isn't. Every gesture is watched. Every peel becomes performance. Every pause becomes a question. The audience, mostly elder women and cheeky aunties, don't just cheer, they critique. And when a bride excels, they ululate so loudly birds take flight. What they're measuring isn't culinary skill, it's sensual intelligence. The quiet control of hands, the unspoken communication of confidence. How you hold a banana, they say, is how you hold a home. Historians still argue whether this ritual was originally a fertility blessing, a marital test, or just a clever excuse to talk about intimacy in public without scandal. Whatever its origin, it has remained one of the most whispered about traditions in East Africa. Some even claim that a bride's performance can determine her social rank for years. One story tells of a woman named Nansubuga who peeled her banana with a single sweep, sliced it into perfect spirals, then balanced it on her palm like a crown. The chief's son proposed on the spot. They hadn't even kissed. Yet. Here's your sex story. A bride named Nakayima was said to be so nervous on the day of her rite that she dropped her banana 3 times before even beginning. The crowd giggled. Her aunt whispered, "He'll leave you by sunset." But Nakayima didn't run. She picked up the banana, kissed it, and then, slowly, playfully, peeled it using only her teeth. The square fell silent. Even the birds stopped. She didn't win applause. She earned reverence. Her husband later confessed that he'd never looked at fruit the same way again. They remained married for 52 years. At her funeral, women passed around bananas and peeled them in her honor. No knives. Just teeth. Just memory. Now for your fringe tidbit. Some villages include a competitive element called amagambe, loosely meaning the banana duel. 2 women stand back to back, given identical bananas, and 10 minutes to transform them into desire. They can sculpt them, decorate them, whisper to them, anything except eat them. When the time is up, the village matron chooses the winner based on instinct alone. One winner reportedly turned her banana into a flute and played a lullaby so haunting that one elder burst into tears. Another braided 3 bananas together into the shape of her lover's initials. He fainted. It's not about perfection. It's about presence. That's the real test. And here's the part that gets overlooked. This isn't just about impressing husbands or onlookers. It's about ownership, of gesture, of sexuality, of ritual. These rites turn taboo into theater, embarrassment into empowerment. By laughing at the awkwardness, by playing with symbolism, the community teaches that intimacy isn't shameful. It's skilled, and skills can be taught, honed, celebrated. You sit now under the canopy, a banana placed before you on a woven mat. It's warm from the sun, and your hands tremble just slightly. Not from fear, from anticipation, from understanding that in this moment, watched by strangers and stars alike, what you do with this fruit might mean nothing, or everything. The laughter of the banana game still echoes in your chest as the land begins to rise beneath your feet. Soft hills rolling like the folds of fabric being drawn around something sacred. You've entered Ndebele territory now, in the southern stretches of Africa, where color doesn't hide. It sings. Everything here is coded. The walls of homes are painted in geometric bursts of turquoise, gold, vermilion, and black. The skirts swish like drum beats. Even the beadwork speaks. And that's where your attention lands now. On a row of women sitting in a circle, fingers flying over tiny colored beads as if conducting electricity through thread. You crouch beside them and realize these aren't necklaces or bracelets. These are messages. Erotic messages, love letters, secret conversations worn on the body, visible to all and yet understood only by the chosen few. This is the language of the Ndebele beaded code, known as Ubulalu. It's not spoken, it's strung. Each color holds meaning: red for passion, white for purity or desire unfulfilled, black for longing, green for invitation. Patterns vary by region, by family, even by emotional intent. But what matters most is placement. A beaded sash worn low on the hips might mean, "I'm ready." A choker with mismatched ends could whisper, "I'm torn." A single line of yellow beads crossing the heart? I waited. You didn't come. Historians still argue whether these bead languages were standardized or personal, but all agree they worked. Because people paid attention. Because love in this culture was not something hidden behind closed doors. It was danced, sung, worn, and occasionally whispered in colors. Here's your sex story. A girl named Thandeka once wore a waist sash made entirely of blue and white beads arranged in a spiral. No one in the village could interpret it, not even her mother. But a boy from a neighboring clan, clever, observant, maybe a little dangerous, saw it during a festival. That night he left a beaded strip at her doorstep. Same colors, same spiral, reversed. They met in secret for years, exchanging beads like love notes. When they were finally caught, her father demanded to know what it meant. She answered, "I told him I dreamed of water. He said he'd become the river." They married at dawn, barefoot and grinning, beads trailing down their spines like truth untangled. Now for your fringe tidbit. Some bead codes weren't about romantic love at all, but revenge. There's a pattern known as instinctively, the second eye, used by women who had been betrayed or publicly shamed. They would wear it subtly, a single bead sewn backward into a headband, a mismatch placed near the ankle. To the untrained eye, it was nothing. But to those who knew, it meant, "I see you twice now, once in memory, once in defense." There are stories of men who stopped courting altogether when they noticed this bead on a woman. Not out of fear, out of respect. Because to be seen twice by someone you hurt is to be truly exposed. And then there were the marriage beads, intricate shimmering girdles worn during ceremonies, crafted by the bride herself. Each strand represented a vow, each knot a promise, each mistake a lesson owned publicly. But here's the part they don't always tell you. Hidden within these beadworks were often sweet lies, symbols added not for truth, but for hope. A red bead placed to imply more passion than existed. A green strand for fertility, even when the bride doubted herself, because sometimes in this language, aspiration was permitted. You didn't have to be completely honest. You just had to be understood. The tactile intimacy of these garments can't be overstated. To run your fingers along someone's beadwork is to read them, literally. Lovers would trace patterns during long silences, decoding and recoding with every shift. One older couple was once asked how they kept their passion alive after 40 years. The wife held up her necklace and said, "Because he still reads me every night. And some nights," he replies, "you sit now with a string of beads in your lap, unsure what to say. A girl beside you hands you a single red bead and a needle. 'Start with this,' she says. 'Red means now.' You thread the bead. Your fingers tremble slightly, but your message is clear. You feel the shift long before you see it. The land flattens, the air thins, and suddenly it's as if you're walking not on earth but on memory itself. Dust clings to your legs, but it doesn't feel dirty. It feels ancient. You've reached Meroe, city of pyramids and smoke, once ruled by queens who wielded incense the way others wielded armies. This is not a place of shouts or celebration. This is the quiet corridor of endings, where the final aphrodisiac waits in silence, still smoldering beneath centuries of sand. You pass pillars crumbling like brittle bones, and the scent hits you, not strong, but unmistakable. Sweet, resinous, a little sad, like the perfume left behind on a scarf you never meant to forget. This is the final incense, made from frankincense, dried lotus root, and the crushed petals of flowers that only bloom when buried alive. It's called riti, which in ancient Nubian means both to burn and to remember. It was used in funerary rites, yes, but also in rituals of parting between lovers who couldn't stay but refused to sever. One partner would light the incense, speak their desire into the smoke, and let it drift across the threshold of separation. It was said to carry the last breath of longing into the dream world, where love could linger without duty, without shame. Historians still argue whether reti was meant to honor the dead, or simply keep them company in that liminal space between body and myth. Either way, it worked, because people believed. And belief is the most potent aphrodisiac of all. Here's your final sex story. A queen known only as the Night-Faced One once fell in love with her own spy, a man tasked with uncovering the plans of her rivals, who instead fell to uncovering the softest parts of her heart. When he was betrayed and sentenced to death, she could not save him publicly. but she ordered a private rite. That night, she lit reti in every room of her palace. The scent covered the stone walls, the guard's armor, the linens in her bed. She stood in silence while the smoke rose, her eyes wet, her lips unmoving. Later, her servants swore they saw the smoke form into his silhouette, bow to her once, then vanish into the night. She never married. But every full moon, she burned the incense again, just in case. Now for your final fringe tidbit. Some versions of riti were designed not to seduce or summon, but to preserve. Women would burn it while weaving their own burial cloths, believing that the scent would keep their sensual energy intact beyond death. So I may still stir hearts, one inscription reads, even when I am dust. There are scrolls buried in tombs detailing the correct way to inhale the smoke, first through the nose for memory, then through the mouth for desire. Couples would sit facing each other, eyes closed, breathing the same smoke until they felt their heartbeats sink. It was not always about love. Sometimes it was about goodbye, a beautiful one. But this isn't just an ending, it's a returning. The final incense wasn't a full stop, it was an ellipsis. It didn't say, you're gone. It said, you were here. It whispered that the body ends, the voice fades, the touch disappears. But what you stirred in someone never quite does. It lingers, it smokes, it haunts. And in that way, the last aphrodisiac is not something you ingest or smear or whisper. It's something you leave behind, intentionally, like a fingerprint, like a scent, like a dream that keeps returning without your permission. You kneel now beside the incense pot. It's old, chipped, but the coal inside glows steady. You add a pinch of resin. The smoke curls toward your face, pauses, then rises. You whisper a name into it. Maybe yours, maybe someone else's. It doesn't matter. The incense knows what to carry. The air tastes bittersweet. The pyramids watch silently. And in this final act of inhalation, you understand. Love, real love. The kind steeped in magic, rooted in soil, written into mirrors and beads and bananas and smoke, was never about possession. It was about presence, about making someone feel more alive, even after you're gone. End of script. Sweet dreams.